Hey, what's up guys? My name is Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. This week in our garden tour we are looking at just the explosion that has happened in the garden. These are the months when the garden is growing the fastest and there's so much to see. If you're new here, welcome. I'm gardening in South Carolina. I am in the upstate and I am in zone 7B, right on the edge there. And I built this garden behind me from scratch. It was just regular lawn last year. We tilled it up, I put down compost and wood chips, and I've been growing in it for a little over a year now. Every single Wednesday on the channel you can see a tour of the garden where I talk about all the cool things that are happening, but also about all the things that are not going according to plan and what I'm trying to do to fix them. So earlier today I was mowing my lawn and I realized that the grass had grown all the way up around this thyme plant that I have here by the walkway, and I had to actually spend some time weeding the grass out in order to be able to not mow over my thyme plant. The grass had grown all the way up over here as well. I usually try to keep the weeds back with cardboard and mulch, but I, as you will find out, am a lazy gardener, and I started seeing the grass growing up here and I was like, oh, I'll deal with it later, and then it got to be a lot. And this poor bee balm got lost in everything. I almost pulled it up with all the weeds, but luckily I realized what it was just in time. So right here on the edge of the garden I have this giant mint plant, some papalo that is growing pretty big. This is a warm weather cilantro substitute. If you are tired of your cilantro going to seed on you in the hot summer months, this is probably something that you would want to try. I have been actually enjoying it. It's a little cilantro-y, but it's also like a little more earthy, I guess. It's really hard to describe. And also the plants were pretty hard to get going, but now that it is established, it is growing pretty vigorously. So far I have put it in guacamole, and that seems to turn out just as good as putting cilantro. Alright, so up on this trellis here I have tomatoes, and actually right here at the corner I have a vining bean. This is a pole bean, purple pole bean, and it is probably going to start flowering here pretty soon. I have one here, one in the middle-ish, and one at the other end. I grew beans with my tomatoes last year, and just 3 bean plants took over like an entire trellis. It was more than enough beans with them being really prolific pole beans. I still haven't seen any ripe tomatoes yet. I started them a little late, but the way they're getting shiny tells me that they are very close to ripening, because if you look, these tomatoes that are smaller near the top, they still are a little fuzzy looking, and so you can tell that they're still actually growing in size, whereas these ones that have gone shiny have stopped growing in size and are spending all their energy ripening. I do have a little bit of that telltale tomato damage near the bottom. I probably should be keeping up with pruning these a little bit more aggressively. This generally happens because of pathogens splashing up from the soil onto the leaves, which is why you'll see a lot of people prune their tomatoes to have just bare stems all the way up until like maybe 1.5 feet from the ground. So I could be being a little bit more on top of that, but as you'll hear me say a lot, I am a lazy gardener, and I do kind of like being able to show you that even if you're not perfect at gardening, it's still pretty much okay. Like you can see I've got a lot of fruits on these very imperfectly pruned tomatoes, and these are just suckers that you're seeing me grab as we go along. These little extra branches that come out in between the main stem and the leafy branches. I still have a lot more weeding to do. Like ideally I would like this entire area right here to be clear, but we'll take it one step at a time. Something interesting though to note is before this was weedy, I had tried to plant carrots here and I thought none of them ever sprouted, but this is very clearly a carrot that has gone to flower. So that's pretty interesting. I don't really want to dig it up. It's probably not got a very edible root, But it's really cool to see that at least one of them survived the jungle. So I just looked over to stand up, and I don't know if you guys can see it right there. I think that might be my first ripening tomato. I haven't come down here as much because the weeds, but look at that. Those look great. I'm probably gonna go ahead and pull those because if I leave my tomatoes too long, often things will eat them, and I would rather have uneaten by bugs tomatoes than have vine ripened tomatoes. I do have a video where I talk about the pros and cons of harvesting tomatoes early versus late and how to tell when to harvest them, so I'll make that pop up if you want to check it out. Man, I'm gonna have to go inside and get a basket. I don't know why I ever come out here without a basket anymore. Alright, basket acquired. I should have brought it anyway because I want to pick some cinnamon basil while I'm out here as well. Alright, so I'm just gonna come down the other side of the tomato trellis. Right here we have peppers. Most of them, I'm gonna set this down, most of them are sweet peppers right here at the front. And I've got some that are starting to turn. This one is turning orange under there. And I have a fact that might blow some of y'all's minds if you are new to growing peppers. Most of them start out green. A green bell pepper is usually just a red or orange or yellow bell pepper that hasn't turned color yet, which is why it's not sweet, because it's not fully ripe. I was telling that to some of my friends and they were like, what? No way. So if you didn't know, now you know. Like, you can see these over here. These are Edgevarsky. They're starting out this green color and slowly ripening to red. And anywhere in here, they are actually very edible. I could pick this and use this like a green pepper, or I can wait for them to turn and have nice sweet red peppers. Right here is my cinnamon basil. I have all sorts of basils scattered throughout the garden, and you can see it's starting to flower. And if I want to keep harvesting off of it, have it make leaves, I need to go ahead and cut all of the flowering tips off. And while I'm at it, I am just going to harvest a bunch of leaves and use it to make a fresh basil tea. So what I'm doing with basil is I'm looking for these places where it splits, and I'm going to cut above the split there. So now if you look, you can see it's got two branches coming off of that, and it will like effectively double itself every time you do that, which is really convenient. This works for every kind of basil. So I'm going to cut this one here, and you can see I've got two now. So instead of pulling off like leaves near the bottom, you really want to be always harvesting basil from near the top. So for those of you who've been following the sickly peppers, none of them have died yet, but they still all look very sick. And occasionally I will find a rotted pepper on one of them, although most of them seem to be making pretty healthy looking peppers. I can show you right here. So these are looking yellow because they're starting to turn red. And then this one has a white spot on it, and that is actually probably sun scald instead of like any other kind of damage, because all the leaves are gone and the sun is, well, scalding them. Still haven't figured out what is causing this, but the plants are pushing through it and surviving, so that at least is positive. Oh, look at that. So this plant is looking more sad. I know it's really pretty, but it was bushier, kind of like this one. But it does have a ripe fish pepper on it. You can still kind of see the stripies on it. These start out green with white stripes, like kind of like that, and then ripen to this. And these are pretty good. These are like mid-tier spicy. They're like hotter than a jalapeno, but not as much as a habanero. That's gonna go in the basket. Oh, over here on the other side of the tomatoes, I want to take a chance to show you this. So this tomato right here has kind of a gross looking bottom to it. And some people will mistake this for blossom end rot, because a lot of times, well, the blossom end, right, you can kind of see on this one, the butt of it is the end that the flower was on, and I just pulled the crusty flower off of that. sometimes the blossom end will rot out, and that can be a calcium deficiency, either in your soil or in the plant itself, from lack of appropriate watering. But this is not that. This is fasciation. So what happened was a bunch of flowers fused together, got pollinated, and made this fused tomato. This one is even more extreme. You can see kind of the seams between tomatoes that got fused. And so these are just cavities that are a result of that fasciation. You'll see this a lot more with heirloom tomatoes than you will with hybrids. This pepper here is a better example of that sun scald spot. That's all that is. The rest of the pepper, once it ripens, will be totally fine to eat as long as the skin doesn't break here. My lemon basil is also starting to flower a bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and harvest as much as I can for tea. It can go in pestos. The lemon flavor is kind of nice, but this is a lot of it, and it kind of can overwhelm the flavor of a pesto. So it makes a really nice tea. Once your basil starts going to flower, it can be pretty difficult to stay on top of it, and I've definitely been known to just give up. Alright, so I got out of the pepper jungle, came back to the front. Here we have a bunch of basils, my experimental cabbage. This got eaten up by a groundhog before I could get to it, and so I just let it keep growing, and it keeps making new little baby heads, but it just is not growing very quick because of the heat, I suppose. Anyways, we've got corn. This is still got a ways to go. I started it a little later than a lot of people would in my area. And if I walk past my giant kale, here we have the radishes that went to seed that I need to take out. And on this trellis right here, I actually have pumpkins, which are starting to take off. These are going to be pie pumpkins, so I'm going to train them up the trellis and have them hang down all cutely. And I think these smaller ones are going to be butternut. And I'll be showing you guys how I care for those squash, because those are going to be a little bit bigger. Past the radishes, I have a little bit of ginger here, some more corn, a beautiful giant nasturtium, and then we get into the eggplant, which is being overrun by turnips that I did not mean to plant. These reseeded themselves from the plants that I let go to seed so that I could save seeds, and then promptly left out in the garden to reseed themselves because, like I said, a bit of a lazy gardener. And the weird thing is these are actually bulbing up a little bit. I might actually have quite a few turnips in here if I care to look. And the greens don't taste too bitter either. Usually root vegetables like this only really root up when it gets cold. So the fact that they are rooting up in the heat is really, really interesting to me, and I need to pull a few and taste them and see if they actually taste any good. But this is a lot. This was not supposed to be here. This is sweet potato and regular potato here. And the sweet potato is supposed to be able to have some of this space, which it is kind of trying to compete for over here. But this is a lot of turnip. And I'm probably just gonna walk on the turnips to get to my eggplants. So these green ones are Antigua, and they make pretty stripy eggplants. Let's see if I can find any. Oh yeah, there's one. Right in there. This is an Antigua eggplant, and I'm also growing Nagasaki long, which are about a little skinnier than this and long and purple. And both of these varieties have a really nice tender skin to them, so you don't have to peel them the way you would those giant eggplant you get from the store. And you watched me just yank this off of the plant. I don't necessarily recommend that, but lazy gardener, I didn't want to go get my clippers. Oh, and look at the trellises. Last year I had the noodle beans in front, and I think they obscured the back trellis, So I kind of like having the front trellis be a little less overgrown so that you can see through both of them at the same time. Over here are cucumbers, which are just now starting to show a little bit of damage from the humidity and from pests. But I've been harvesting quite a few cucumbers off of these. These are white pickling cucumbers, and they tend to be turning yellow at the top when they are ready. Oh, yep. And so I have been collecting these, and I'm going to make a big batch of pickles soon. But something interesting to know, you see how the shape of this is not like a cylinder, it is a little pointed at the end. That is probably due to inconsistent watering, or in my case, inconsistent weather forecast. I'm just going to go ahead and pull some more that are ready, and because I am holding you guys, this is going to drop. But it's fine. Lots of leaves to dampen the fall. Hi, Draco. Yeah, so this one is a little farther along. It might have more developed seeds inside of it. I should probably be picking them a little smaller than this, but if you've ever grown cucumbers, you know how fast they get away from you. Picked a couple more and found this one, which is an extreme version of what I just showed you with the pointy end. Generally, like I said, an indicator of inconsistent water for the plant. This is what I'm talking about. These are just in my walkway. They are everywhere in the garden. But they are little turnips, so I might as well see how they are. Alright, so we are going to go down the last row here. I have more lemon basil and zinnias intermixed with peppers here. And I wish I could tell you off the top of my head what these peppers are. These kind of look like Anaheim peppers. Most of the ones over here are hot peppers. I have some that are supposed to be, this one is golden honey, and I probably have some cayenne and maybe serrano over here. Oh, and I do have these adorable little pumpkin peppers that are supposed to turn orange. But I've been really liking the zinnias intermixed with the peppers so far. They just seem to like grow really well together, and the zinnias are pretty good about supporting themselves and not going crazy, so everybody gets their space. Passing the potatoes again on my right. This ginger I forgot was here when I planted this potato here, and so these are probably competing pretty hard for space under there, but I left it because, you know, we'll see what happens. These potatoes are actually starting to look like they are getting close to harvestable. I didn't really see them flower, but the plants are just now starting to die back, and you kind of want to wait till potatoes look awful before you harvest underneath. And you can usually just kind of pull back the soil and take a peek at what's going on underneath. And I'm not running into any potatoes immediately, so there's probably not a lot down there yet. I'll cover that back up and we will wait. What you doing, Draco? Looking cute. It's a talent of yours, isn't it? The temperature is really great out here right now, but the downside is that I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. So we will quickly check on the raised bed and the berries before I go inside. The raised bed isn't changing a lot right now. A lot of things in here have gone to seed. Oregano gone to seed, parsley gone to seed. I haven't actually ever seen a sage plant go to seed. And then the thyme went to seed earlier this year and is looking like real healthy. We've got stevia and Mexican tarragon, which I still haven't tried yet, but it is doing good. I keep meaning to make chicken tarragon with it, but there's so many other things in the garden that are coming out that need cooking, and they don't really go with chicken tarragon. So the tarragon has been getting neglected. Over here at the berry patch, you can see the grass is trying to claim it as its own. Last week, we saw the devastation of the strawberry. It seems like maybe a deer or a rabbit came by and mowed it over. But, I mean, these blackberries, these look fine. They are growing new leaves. I'm not super worried. Oh, that's a spiky weed. And the strawberries, yeah, they weren't making fruit anyway. And you see all these runners. They will definitely root and take off next year, and I will have plenty of strawberries. So I'm not super worried about that. Although I'm thinking I do need to get a trellis in here pretty soon to start supporting these bushes, because I'm noticing them getting long and flopping, and I would really rather them be trained up off the ground from the beginning as much as I can. Pretty good harvest. A couple eggplant, some cucumbers, basil, turnips for some reason, and a couple peppers, and the very first tomatoes. So I'm going to take all this inside before I am absolutely covered in mosquito bites. But thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, every Wednesday you can come and check in on the garden. I'm going to put up here the garden tours from this year and last year if you care to catch up. But until next time, I wish you happy gardening.